Welcome to Red, White, and Blue. From the right, I'm Gary Polland.
And from the left, I'm David Jones.
Tonight, we welcome Attorney General Greg Abbott. Greg is a former state district judge, former Supreme Court judge. He's a husband, father, and son, and he does all of them well. Welcome.
Great to be with you. Thanks.
It's 2010. You filed for a nomination as for another term as Attorney General of Texas in the Republican primary. You did that just recently, I understand. And you have about $8.5 million in the bank, is what is reported. Is that going to be enough? And are you certain that you want to be Attorney General, given what we understand might be some moving chairs in the Republican Party?
Well, I'm focused on my re-election as Attorney General, and I'm in it to win it. And we want to put together the resources that will be needed to help carry a message across the state of Texas. We want to inform our fellow Texans about what we've accomplished and what we want to do to help solve their problems. As Attorney General, I've collected more child support than any Attorney General in history. I've collected more than $15 billion in child support. I've arrested and put behind bars more criminals than any Attorney General in Texas history. I've paid out more money in Crime Victims Compensation Fund than any Attorney General in Texas history. And we've recovered more environmental fines than any Attorney General in Texas history. But what's important is what we're going to be doing to solve problems for Texans in a go-forward basis. You know, there's a couple of issues that are impacting Texans more than anything else. One, of course, is the economy and jobs. But layered on top of that are the ways in which the federal government is reaching into our lives and intruding governmental controls over our lives. People are questioning, why will the economy not grow up faster? And the reason is simple, and that's because the overlay of these new government regulations, new taxation, that are going to put a lid on our ability to grow.
Now, that's what a candidate for the U.S. Senate would say, and I don't blame you for making it. Now, who is Ted Cruz, and why is he also running for Attorney General? Because he has a website that says that's what he's doing. Well, he also brags on you a whole lot. I know he was made Solicitor General.
Well, he doesn't say when he's running, though, David.
Well, I mean, he's your Solicitor General, or he was for about 5 years, and he says he's running for Attorney General, and he says that what you and he accomplished together is that you defended the Ten Commandments and the Pledge of Allegiance, the Second Amendment, and the sovereignty of the United States. I'm very happy to hear that none of those have been enumerated by you as your, choice acts.
Well,
so tell us about this guy, and why is he so certain that you're not running for Attorney General?
Well, the filing deadline has come and gone, and I am the only Republican who is on the ballot for Attorney General. Ted Cruz was my Solicitor General and did a fabulous job for the people of the state of Texas and had a huge impact on this nation. As Solicitor General, Ted was in charge of arguing cases to the United States Supreme Court. I personally argued one myself, where I started to say stood before the Supreme Court, but as you all know, the audience may not, I can't stand because I'm in a wheelchair. But I personally argued before the U.S. Supreme Court in defense of the constitutionality of the Ten Commandments monument that stands on the Texas Capitol grounds, and won that in a 5-4 decision. But on top of that, I've taken the lead among AGs across the country in defending our liberties as they were committed to us in the Constitution. One of those you made reference to, which is the Second Amendment. Currently, as we speak here today in late January, I have taken the lead on behalf of 38 states in filing a brief with the United States Supreme Court urging the court to uphold the individual right to keep and bear arms in the McDonald versus Chicago case. That comes on the heels of the Heller case, which was a Washington, D.C. based case, where as Attorney General I took the lead on behalf of 32 states. It was in that Heller case that Ted Cruz authored the brief and made an oral argument at the Court of Appeals on behalf of those who believe in an individual right under the Second Amendment.
You're going to take on Second Amendment issues?
Well, I was going to talk about that. Is the Washington, D.C. case the case that has caused the Washington basketball players to run afoul of because they were carrying handguns? Is that the guy?
Exactly.
If they were in Texas, they could get a concealed carry permit. They'd have no problem, right? So, David, we could get some better basketball players.
Mr. Attorney General, you know the Heller case did nothing in terms of saying to states that you cannot regulate handgun violence, that certain types such as concealed carry, registration, any number of other regulations were not challenged and remain on the books in many states that frustrate, of course, people from such as terrorists getting weapons at gun shows perhaps is one that we should consider. Are you for terrorists being able to sign up for gun shows and get weapons? Is that what you think the Second Amendment means?
Well, first of all, the legal niceties, and that is what Heller dealt with was the ability of the federal government to reach into the homes of individuals and regulate whether or not they can possess a gun to protect themselves. Importantly, here's the key part, and that is in the current case before the Supreme Court, that is the case that deals with state and local regulations. And that's why winning the McDonald case before the Supreme Court right now is so important, to uphold the individual rights against a state or local government infringing on the Second Amendment rights we were given in the United States Constitution.
Second Amendment rights for individuals.
For individuals to keep and bear arms.
States, you're saying, have none under the Second Amendment. They can't do anything. They remain helpless to control handgun violence because of the Second Amendment. Is that it?
Well, what has happened right now is that the city of Chicago had ordinances concerning the regulation of the possession of firearms. And that was upheld, and that is what is being challenged in the U.S. Supreme Court. We will know, in part, on Texas Independence Day, because it is March the 2nd of this year when that case is going to be argued to the U.S. Supreme Court. The decision will come out in June that will let us know whether or not states can infringe on our Second Amendment rights.
Pretty soon we're going to hear about the Alamo,
Well, I think that could be important. I want to go back to politics because, we talk about politics. David talked about rumors, dominoes falling and the like, but it's important because our viewers are not necessarily political insiders, and they kind of want to know what happened. So to give a little background, in the spring, in the summer, there were rumors that Senator Hutchinson was going to resign her Senate seat and run for governor. She decided later not to resign her Senate seat and run for governor anyway. But then there was rumors, who goes where? One of the rumors was David Dewhurst was a guest on our show, lieutenant governor now, was going to run for the U.S. Senate. He told us he was interested if it was available. There were rumors you were then in turn going to run for lieutenant governor, and then there were rumors that Ted Cruz and maybe others were going to run to fill your big shoes as Attorney General of Texas.
Gary
that's what was out
wants
there.
some facts. Okay.
No, well, those are out. That's what was out there. I mean, you heard all those rumors.
Well, you all know as well as I do, being experienced lawyers and politicians yourselves, that there's always the constant political rumor mill that's taking place. But separate from the rumor mill is the reality. The reality is that in the fall, I was the Attorney General for the state of Texas. The reality is that come January 4th of this year, I'm the Republican who is the nominee, or will be, for Attorney General in the state of Texas. And I'm focused solely upon being the next Attorney General in this state, continuing to represent the people of this state, protecting them from the kinds of federal encroachments that we're seeing, which is why I'm lodging these constitutional challenges to federal overreach, such as things like the Obamacare health care plan.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. But you're also making constitutional arguments, and I assume that you're ready to advise state agencies and other political players who raise money and spend money in the state whether or not adjustments need to be made in state laws as a result of the, some would say, encroachment of the United States Supreme Court by throwing out the McCain-Feingold legislation restricting corporate money being spent on federal elections. Are you advising them, and do you consider that an encroachment?
Well, what the Supreme Court does is decide the constitutionality of laws that are passed by Congress as well as laws that may be passed by the states. And so courts don't encroach. Courts decide whether or not laws encroach upon the Constitution. In this case, the court felt that the law that was passed, McCain-Feingold, encroached upon First Amendment rights to speak out in the election process.
So you like this ruling?
Well, the Supreme Court ruled, in essence, in favor of more information as opposed to less information in an election process. And what people need, what voters need in order to help make decisions is more information.
Sandra Day O'Connor says it is wrong. It overruled two precedents which she authored. And she says, especially in judicial elections, we're about to have anybody who wants to buy a judge can. Is she right?
Well, Senator Day O'Connor is not on the United States Supreme Court right now. She didn't vote in that case. What is right in this country is what the United States Supreme Court decides. And we will follow the United States Supreme Court decision and make sure that Texas laws comply with that. Here's the reality. Texas law is not going to change all that much. It is still illegal for a corporation or a union to give campaign contributions directly to a candidate. It is still illegal for corporations or unions to coordinate expenditures with regard to a candidate. All this allows a corporation or union to do is what was being challenged in this lawsuit, and that is corporations contributed money that paid for a book that had negative things to say about Hillary Clinton during an election cycle. And so the McCain-Feingold was suppressing free speech to the extent that it disallowed publication and distribution of a book. I believe our country is stronger than that. I believe that we can withstand the powerful competing ideas that allow people to make their own decisions with regard to whom to vote for based upon the abundance of information they should have access
to.
So
you reject David's idea that we're now going to have judges bought, essentially by vast corporate or union money.
I believe that the judges that the people here in Harris County have elected to the courts, I believe that the judges they elect statewide are top quality judges whom I respect greatly. And I feel that the Texas judicial system compares favorably to any state judicial system in the entire country, despite the fact that we elect judges here.
Yeah, and we also, by the way, have some limitations on how much you can take from people.
Yeah, very good point, which is what you call a reasonable regulation based upon the First Amendment. There are caps as to how much money can be given to a judicial nominee.
Yeah, we're not like New York where you can take corporate money for political donations.
Exactly. And there are other states. I think Florida is one. Virginia may be one. There are some other states where they do allow direct corporate contributions to campaigns. That is disallowed in the state of Texas.
Hopefully it doesn't change.
Tom DeLay seems to think that this ruling at the Supreme Court is going to benefit him because, you know, he was indicted for having been a part of a coordinated corporate laundering of money so that he could get a few people elected to the State House of Representatives. Have you studied this enough to know whether Tom has any hopes here?
I haven't studied it to that extent. Haven't studied it with regard to the application of any particular case. Studied it to the extent that I know generally what it provides and the extent to which it may alter the Texas laws that are currently on the books.
Let's talk about 10th Amendment, your involvement in the vanguard of leadership of taking out legally some of the provisions of Obamacare that may hopefully be on life support in light of the Massachusetts election, but still you're out there legally going after it. Tell us what you've been doing.
First principles, and that is people need to understand that the federal government doesn't have unlimited authority. The federal government has only limited authority that is specifically enumerated in the United States Constitution. And the 10th Amendment reserves to the states or to the people all powers that are not directly given to the United States government. And as it concerns health care, we believe that what the United States Congress has passed and what Obama has been pushing violates the United States Constitution for several reasons. First, it violates the 10th Amendment by overreaching. Secondly, in order for Congress to pass a law, they have to have a constitutional basis or reason why they can pass that law. They passed two laws that we are challenging the constitutionality of with regard to Obamacare. One is what is known as the Nebraska Compromise. That's the most charitable label that can be put on it. Other labels that are put on it is the Cornhusker Kickback. The reason is because Nebraska, and only Nebraska, was exempted from paying out what will cost in order to expand the Medicaid system in Nebraska. And the irony is that the people of the state of Texas, because of the new health care legislation, will be required to spend about $20 billion in the coming years to build a Medicaid system here. And on top of that, Texans would have to pay money to build out the Medicaid system in Nebraska.
Let's take them one at a time and address the great corrupt bargain of Nebraska. The letter that you received inviting you to participate in this was from Senators Cornyn and Hutchison. Now, the letter of opinion that you gave about these arguments that you're making was dated January the 5th, and they sent you a letter December 23rd. Now, tell us whether this is an official opinion of the Attorney General's office, or is this just Greg Abbott on the Constitution?
Well, this is an official position taken by Greg Abbott, the Attorney General of Texas, to United States senators who asked for advice. But this letter that I wrote to Senators Cornyn and Hutchison was in addition to another letter that I sent out before that one, where I was working in conjunction with other state attorneys general across the country, where we were trying to flag the constitutional issues that the Senate was facing and trying to pass a bill that we thought violated the United States Constitution. So we've sent several letters to Senate leaders to help them understand not to pass this law because the actions they're taking violate our constitutional rights.
But you're not seriously suggesting that the agencies of the state of Texas can sue the federal government and that they have standing to stop a particular appropriation, are you? I mean, horse trading is what politicians do, and Supreme Courts and other courts have said, we don't interfere. That's not justiciable.
Well,
so where do you get the idea that you could stop, one bit of little horse trade?
Well, first, I think we need to address the horse trading issue, and that is that what we saw last week in Massachusetts was an uprising about what you categorize as horse trading. This wasn't the typical negotiation as it concerns a compromise in a Senate bill. This was literally buying the 60th vote in order to avoid a filibuster in the United States Senate where Nebraskans and only Nebraskans benefited. So if you call this horse trading, or if you want to call it vote buying, if you want to call it corruption, whatever label you put on it, is the kind of actions that Americans are no longer going to tolerate
and I can
in the
accept
United
all of
States
those.
Congress.
And I don't like it either. I'm just telling you, I don't see what the constitutional issue is.
Well,
but make your second argument because you had another one.
Well, two very important things. One, there are certain constitutional bases in which the state of Texas can assert a legal action. But secondly, there are certain constitutional bases upon which individuals can assert a legal action. What I did was to advise the United States Congress, and in particular the senators from the state of Texas, about the constitutional infirmities of this particular bill. They need to know if they may be taking action that may violate the Constitution, regardless of who may have standing to assert that cause of action. And one thing I can assure you is if they pass that bill in its current format, it will be challenged legally, whether by individuals or whether by the state of Texas. But regardless of who challenges it, I, as the Attorney General for the state of Texas, will be there either filing that action or filing an amicus brief on behalf of and support of someone who does file that action to make sure that our Constitution is not going to be trampled upon.
You conceded in your letter that there may be legitimate regulations of commerce that are implicated here. So I don't understand how it is, because you mentioned the special tax that individuals would have assessed against them if they didn't purchase insurance is somehow violative of the Commerce Clause. Are you seriously raising that?
Absolutely. That's the most important issue that we're dealing with here, because if we lose on this Commerce Clause claim, there truly is no limit to what Congress can do. Let me try to briefly explain this. Congress is trying to pass in the health care reform package what they call the individual mandate. What that means is there's a mandate, an order by Congress to every American that you must purchase health care insurance. Importantly, the Congressional Research Service, the Congressional Budget Office, both issued a report saying never in the history has the United States Congress ordered Americans to purchase something merely as a fact of being an American citizen. And the Congress, realizing that this could pose constitutional problems, said, okay, no, this is based upon the Commerce Clause. And the reason they did that is because the U.S. Supreme Court has very broadly interpreted the Commerce Clause. But we believe that...
They're right.
No.
Is there anything more national in scope than the healthcare system in the United States?
Well,
the federal system of healthcare is probably 60% of the spending on health in the United States. So this is a huge
let me ask you this.
Interstate commerce issue.
Don't you think driving involves interstate commerce?
I do.
And don't you think that air pollution involves interstate commerce? Then you would agree under that application that Congress can order every American to buy an electric car from General Motors.
That would be the theory, sure.
Politically, that may be unrealistic. Legally, if this theory flies that Congress is resting it upon, they could order every American to buy an electric car from General Motors.
And the reason they can do that is because, in terms of the Commerce Clause, it's because everybody gets sick. And you don't want everybody just sitting around going to an emergency room, and you don't want people going to public hospitals who have the means to take care of themselves. Because that implicates my pocketbook and interstate commerce.
Well, you make a half-valid point, and that is that there are concerns about our healthcare system. And we need to do a better job of making sure that more people in this country are taken care of. There are constitutional paths that Congress can take in getting there. By overextending the Commerce Clause in this regard, it is going to be detrimental to all Americans forevermore by giving Congress unlimited authority to intervene in our lives.
Yeah, we don't want that, do we?
We don't want that. It's a fight.
David may not even want it when he thinks about it.
I don't want to be made to buy insurance from State Farm for car protection either.
No.
I don't like that.
And that's exactly what would happen. If this law passes, Congress could order all Americans to buy auto insurance regardless of whether or not you drive a car, have a driver's license, or may never drive.
Just to be fair. Let's talk about, we talked about the federal government. Texas does benefit, I guess, from the federal government in that we get lots of money, billions and billions of dollars, normally in appropriations, block grants, or funds tied to different programs. In addition, last year, under the stimulus plan, Texas got $15 or $16 billion, which essentially bailed Texas out of our budget problems because of the bad economy. Do we need to find a way, Attorney General Abbott, to separate from all this federal strings that come to Texas with all these dollars?
Well, cutting the string to Washington, D.C. would be beneficial, not just for people in the state of Texas, but for people in every state. And so the more that Texas can wean itself off of this federal funding, which means federal enforcement, the better we would be, the more independent we would be, and I think the stronger our economy would be. But in the meantime, we're not going to pay our tax dollars to Washington, D.C. and not get our fair share back.
For example, would you support taking the federal transportation tax and just having the money automatically returned to the state that remitted it? 100%.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Just send it back.
Texas should be getting back 100% of what we send to Washington, D.C.
Greg, let's talk about your job as Attorney General, because you're also involved in that office with the administration of criminal justice and the death penalty. Deborah Medina, who's running for governor, was here. She says we need a moratorium on the death penalty, especially given the actions of the governor of Texas in purging a committee that was set up to look at arson science and to see whether or not someone had been executed who may have been innocent. And there may have been others, maybe others on death row who are innocent, for all we know. Do we need a moratorium on the death penalty? And is your office dedicated to finding good science as you litigate these federal writs of habeas corpus?
A couple of structural things up front. First, a moratorium is not something that either the governor could order or that the Attorney General could order. The death penalty system is based upon a law, and the only way to change that would be for the legislature to change it. Second thing, I'd say by far the most important thing to understand here, and that is that those of us who want to see a criminal justice system that holds wrongdoers accountable, no one benefits when we have a death penalty system implemented incorrectly and for there to be an innocent person sentenced to death.
Is your staff going to continue to have this fellow George Dinkowski giving them opinions about mental retardation when his license is now being challenged and he's been accused of just using junk science in his opinions?
Well, here's what's going to be important, and that is that the way the system works is that no one is executed for a death penalty crime without receiving layer upon layer upon layer of access to justice. They have to be brought before a court and tried before a jury of their peers. Then that is appealed to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. And then it goes through a layer of appeals in the federal system. And then once again it goes through the habeas process. And so court after court after court has the opportunity to review the facts of a case, review the application of law to a case, and then re-review it one last time.
But are you suspicious of this particular expert who's now being challenged as having rendered opinions that are not valid? And I think it's your office that's picking
Are you
him.
talking about it in the forensic commission? Well,
no, I'm talking about the mental retardation.
Oh,
we don't execute those folks anymore. We used to, quite liberally.
Well, we believe that by looking at the system the way it is structured and providing those who are accused of these crimes and sentenced to these crimes with the access to multiple levels of courts and court reviews, they receive due process and have the ability to present to those courts the full array of the issues that may call into question whether or not they were either wrongfully convicted or whether or not they should be subjected to the death penalty. And when you look at the multiple avenues that they have to court review, we feel confident that the system is working currently.
You mentioned the Forensic Science Commission, and my question would be quite simple. If you were making the decision, would you have sacked the entire commission at a time when they're about to take testimony involving a potentially wrongful application of the death penalty?
Well, you're posing in the sense of maybe kind of what happened. If I understand the facts, it wasn't the entire commission that was sacked. There were 2 new appointees made by the governor, and those were appointees made to fill terms that had expired. And so the governor was fully within his authority to make those new appointments.
Yeah, well, maybe you put the death penalty in question. As you said, we don't want to do that because otherwise the death penalty could disappear. That's a problem.
And listen, it's been fun. Thanks for being here.
It's great to be with you guys again.
Come back and do this again, will you?
Anytime.
You can watch a follow-up discussion of tonight's show, plus read more about Red, White, and Blue by visiting us at HoustonPBS.org, so check that out. And until next time, get informed and get active.